Hi, I'm Paul Holmes-Higgin. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Flowable, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the future product plans that we have in mind. Before I do that, a quick reminder, if you scroll down in the window, there is options for joining a chat room where you can chat with other people that are also joining FlowFest. And there's a separate window for questions. So if you've got any questions that come up while I'm wittering away, you can post them there and hopefully get time to answer them at the end. And of course, this is being recorded, so if you find you have to rush off at any moment, I hope you don't, then there will be a recording later on that you can come back and visit. So I'm going to talk about some things which are happening in the future. And these things, there's two aspects. There's a whole bunch of innovations that obviously we're working on. I'm going to focus on two of them. One is something that'll be coming fairly soon, and this is around Flowable Design. And the other is a longer term plan. It's more of a blueprint to give you an idea of the direction we're going in, the way we think about automation and the future of these things. So I'm going to start with Flowable Design. If you've been watching some of the other sessions or you're familiar with the enterprise version of Flowable, you will be familiar with Flowable Design. It's our application for designing models, drawing BPMN diagrams, CMMN diagrams, describing channel models, event models, content models, whatever. And it's been around for a while and it's starting to show its age. And there's a number of things we want to do, and basically we decided now was the time to actually, revisit how we were working with design and what we needed to do to move forward. And we came to the conclusion, basically, we needed to completely revamp the front end. We wanted to be able to use some of the modern web frameworks so that we could take advantage of what they offer, plus also all the new capabilities that modern browsers have. So that was one side of things. The other was also just to revisit the user experience, because one thing we found is we focus very much on the expert when we're dealing with the design tool. And whatever we do going forward has still to be really fast and snappy for the people that live within Flowable Design day in, day out. It's got to be something that really works effectively and productively for them. But there's another community of people which we're increasingly getting to, which are novices or occasional users. These may be business analysts or even highly motivated business users. And for them, understanding BPMN or understanding how to work with a user task even, there's a lot of information that you have to do. So we wanted to help guide people through creating these models and just make it a lot more straightforward for people. One of the other big decisions we made was we were going to completely replace the visual diagramming code that we use for the BPMN and CMMN modeling, just again to allow us to be able to do things going forward that would be a lot more productive, but a lot more snappy and everything else. And really, what we're wanting to do with the front end is make it a platform for all the future evolutions that we want to have. So if we want to add new capabilities going ahead, we've actually built it so that we've got a lot more capabilities and possibilities that are there. And so some of the things that come in with this new design is wizards. So these wizards will allow you to create some of the entities like a user task or a service task and take you through a number of steps to allow you to get really rapidly create the things, do some editing of them. The new canvas editing environment will allow us to be able to even smooth a drag and drop, being able to resize. Everything feels like a desktop application. There's also dialogues for editing the attributes of things. If you've used this tool before, you will see that you can have 50 odd attributes for something like a user task, and actually finding the one you want to work on or work with it. The current design uses a side panel for editing attributes. That really limits what you can do. So we wanted to introduce dialogues again to give more scope for the editing. Being able to work with the palette when you're doing design, dragging and dropping things on, just be able to work with the palette more effectively, different gestures and things like this. When you're connecting things up, smarter connections happening, sort of a bit more aware of what's been going on with the connections, and still being able to have full attribute overviews and things like that. So there's a bunch of things that we wanted to introduce, as well as being able to do everything that you could always do before with design. So we've changed the whole visualization and the navigation around it. And it starts with applications. Apps are where you would have a collection of models, usually related models. So you've got a loan origination application, then all your models relating to that, the processes, the case, the forms would all live within that model. And within the new design tool, you'll be able to work with any number of applications from just one or two, and you can work with different card views or list views. If you're just working with one or two, you'll probably work with the card view. We have some customers where they're working with tens or even 100 applications. And so working with a list view and having really smart filtering and sorting allow you to find the app that you want to work with at any point in time. And also, again, the focus throughout is to be able to quickly create new applications or entities, whatever, or import them if there's something that's shared from an external system, something like that. So everything starts with an app, and you navigate in through your apps. And once you're into an app, you'll have a collection of the models. And again, we have customers where there's hundreds of models that live within an app. You might have tens of different forms with different variations, or process snippets, fragments, whatever that go up to make your overall application. So again, you're working with different models. They've got different properties, different elements that you want to manage as models. And again, the same easy filtering, sorting, and setting up things how you want to work, and being able to find things amongst that sort of hundreds of models that you might be playing with. Again, really quick and easy to create a new model or import an existing one, or if it's from a shared from another application. All of those capabilities that you're used to with the current design tool will be there as well. One of the things that we've added, which you can't do with the current design, is the ability to switch between your editor views and your model views. So you can be working with the models, managing the models within your application, maybe start editing on some and then realize you need to do some more model management. So you can switch between the two without having to close the editor and come back in and start everything like that. So there's a lot of thinking that's gone into how people work with these different views and things within design. A real focus for the work here is around the actual editing, particularly the visual editing. So the editor itself is a tabbed model editor. So you can open any number of models that you want to work with, and each of them will be on a different tab, and you can work with it. And there'll be a mix of models that you can have. They not all have to be all the BPMN or CMMN visual ones. There may be other models that you've got there, like security models or content models, or some of these event models where they're not so graphical. They're actually, you're configuring things through forms and data entry and things like this. Obviously, if you're working with tens of editing tens of models at a time, you'll have tens and tens of tabs. Having the ability to find a tab and bring it to the front and things like that. So all this sort of navigation in the very simple scale, I'm just working with one or two models, or I'm working with tens or hundreds of models, editing tens or hundreds, hopefully not hundreds, but tens at a time. The ability to actually work the way you want to work, whether you're a novice or whether you're a superstar working with these things, just be able to navigate and work the way you want to work. And the other side of things is trying to create a common experience. So when you're editing these different types of models, there'll be a common toolbar that will remain consistent, whatever type of model you're doing. And if you're in a visual model, then there'll be a palette for tools that you can use within your visual modeling. If you're in one of the more configuration-based models, then you'll still have that same toolbar to manage the model as a whole, but you won't have this sort of palette for dragging and dropping things on necessarily. So where possible, the experience is shared and everything feels very common. You'll know where to look for things if you want to save a model or you want to duplicate a model. Those will all be in the same place. And again, even from here, you'll be able to create new models or import new models and start working with them directly. So it's all about, what are the ways that people like working? What are the ways we can optimize the way that people work? And a really good example of the type of thing that we can do far more simply now with the new canvas editing that we've got is we can have a mini map. So if you've got a large say, a large BPMN model, actually having something that allows you to navigate around the whole model and see it at a reasonable resolution at the same time. That feature was something that we could add in very simply with the new framework that we're building here. So a lot of effort has gone into this environment, and this is also where you can expect over time more and more features to come into play. I mentioned attribute wizards. The idea here is really to help the novice or the occasional user to step them through creating something like a user task. The example here, that we've got 4 steps that you take them through. The idea of the wizard is really the majority of things you need to do, or the common things you need to do, they'll be captured in the wizard, and they'll be really easy for you to do. And there'll be guidance. So on each step as you go through, there'll be guidance that informs you about the information on that step. And even as you work and select on a particular field, the advice and guidance will be tuned to that particular piece of information you're working on. The other thing we're conscious of is, even if you're an expert, these wizards can be a really powerful, quick way for you to work as well. You don't need to go through all the steps. You can jump the steps and you can just fill in the fields you want to do and finish at any time. So even if you're a power user, you'll probably still end up using wizards because they're the quickest way to get the 80% of what you want done really quickly, particularly as you're building up a process. You just want to get an overall flow for the process or the case. Just being able to sort of drop something on the canvas, pull up the wizard, do the basics and move on. It just allows you to actually keep moving with taking the business concept from your head and getting it mapped out into your diagrams. So it's not just for novices. We're going to be finding that experts are using the wizards just as much. Some of the nice things for the wizard, as there's multiple steps, there are indicators on the steps that tell you there are some required fields on this particular step. So you know you've got to visit that step to complete something. Also, if you come back at a later date and edit an element again, something like a user task, if there's information that's already filled in, then in the step there'll be a little marker telling you that there's data already there. So again, when you're looking at something that maybe someone else has modified or created, you get a very quick a feel for what information is available there. So wizards are a big focus, and there'll be wizards for every type of element that you're working with in BPMN and CMMN. The other big decision we made was, even when you go down to working at the individual attribute level, when you get into some of the more the less common attributes, whatever that you might want to work with, we're still going to be working with attributes within a dialogue and grouping attributes together. A couple of reasons for this. One is that it allows us to, and allows you to actually work and modify attributes of an entity without necessarily being in the same place all the time. So with the current design tool, there is a side panel that shows all the attributes, and you need to be in the editor to be able to see those attributes or do anything with those attributes. By making things into a dialogue, first of all, you'll be able to access that dialogue and work with it other places within the design tool as well. But more importantly, it gives us a lot more space for rich editing of the information. So you're not being squeezed into a tiny little panel to work on. There's a lot more assistance that we can give. So there are tools that allow you to build up expressions or work with variables. Working with those tools with a bit more space, it allows, again, just a much quicker way and a more focused way to actually configure things. And also, there will be dialogues which aren't available, aren't even visible from the wizards. And again, having something a lot more structured to be able to edit them, within the dialogue will give a lot of benefits, even for the power user. When you get to things like multi-instance tasks with variable aggregation or task listeners, there's an awful lot of information that gets tied together, and just trying to squeeze that into a thin column of attributes with text fields that you have to fill in just doesn't cut it. You want to be able to interact and look at what variables may be associated with a listener and a sort of Java class that's plugged in and things. So the dialogues will just allow us to help, again, even the most experienced modeler see at a glance what's going on and be able to modify things very quickly. The other area, as I alluded to, where a lot of work is going into is the actual drawing palette. So when you're doing the visual design of something like a BPMN, people work different ways. Some people will work with a palette where they drag, just a standard thing from the palette, drop it onto the wherever they want on the BPMN diagram, and then maybe click and switch it to a different type of element. So it might start with a user task, and actually I want to make this a service task, and switch it once it's onto the canvas to a service task, and then start working on it. Other people like to be able to choose upfront what they want. And so what we've done with the palette and the drag and drop and selection is basically you can decide which way you want to work. You can click on the palette and choose the type of entity that you want to have, and then drag and drop it onto the thing. Or you can be in place on a particular element, bring up the selection, the palette to be able to say what comes next. And again, you could just drag and drop something straight on, or you can click and let it go with the default, or you can click and choose the thing you want it to go to and just work. So again, just a variety of different ways that allow people to work the way they want to work. And over time, the ability to, one of the nice things with re-implementing this in some of the modern tools, is just the ability for us to think about adding new gestures in the future, so that again we can make simple assumptions around what you're doing when you're dragging multiple things on. Okay, well, we need to create a gateway for you because you're going to be putting a gateway in there, aren't you? So a lot of the things there we'll be able to improve over time, just again to make that ability to create processes and cases and those models much more straightforward. Just the standard things you would expect: alignment and snap. You resize something so that you can see, am I resizing it the same size as these other things? So is this going to be, following the same horizontal line? Are things going to be parallel, whatever? A lot of the tools that let you keep your diagrams looking nice, and also being able to snap, so that, again, you keep your things very sharp. Having things like clear pop-up context tool, so just making it a lot easier to see when you're working on a focused piece of a task. Just what you can do with that, sort of calling up the wizards or looking at the properties, navigating to maybe a related form, or configuring it, or adding in a new step or something like that. So a lot of work is going into how you can actually interact with the elements on the canvas. The forms editor is also being updated to be completely using the new capabilities as well. So now when you create a form, you'll see, as you're designing it and laying it out, exactly as the end user will see. So you'll see if you've chosen a complex component that you're going to drag and work on. When you drop it on, that's what you'll see. You'll see the complex component, not an abstraction of it. So again, you'll get a very sort of immediate view of what is the user going to see from this. But again, it's going to be the same consistent editing experience. So you're not drawing a BPMN, CMMN diagram, but you're still going to have a palette that looks a similar type of palette, and you're still going to be able to drag and drop things, and the interactions within the elements and the components will follow the same pattern. So just once you're used to working with the editing, you'll be able to use that whether you're working with CMMN, BPMN, or working with a form. But all the rich capabilities of the form components that you're used to, they're all there. So nested elements, subforms, tabs, wizards, accordions, all of those things there. The dynamic behavior that you can have between them. So being able to quickly configure relationships between elements. So this tab disappears unless this particular feature is selected and this checkbox is ticked or whatever. All that very dynamic behavior that you currently have. Again, a lot more tools to help you design those interactions more easily. It will be all part of the form editing. The other thing is also just some of the capabilities that are already there. We like talking about low code, and some of the things that we've got in the current design, things like the condition builder, variable assistant, we're just going to keep refining those and again, adding more and more productivity capabilities there. So with the condition builder, make it even easier. You don't need to know the expression language. You can actually point and click and create a conditional expression for your flows. And you can just literally build it up, a bit like building a real point and click, just, like I say, not need to know anything about the underlying expression language if you don't want to. The variable assistant as well already is quite useful to give you some pop-up for help for when you start auto-completing a variable, so you can see what variables are available. We're making that even more context sensitive. So you'll only see variables that can apply to where you are in the process. So if you're in a particular part of the process, you may not have been exposed to certain variables yet. Well, you won't see those in the variable assistant, making it so it's picking up more of the complex variable options as well. So again, just refining the capabilities to make it even easier for you to know what to do. And the real exciting possibilities are what we can do in the future. So some of the things that we're already planning now on doing, adding some of the more sort of complex or rich editing experiences, but also collaboration. So you could have in-place collaboration. You want to actually collaborate around the configuration of a user task or annotate things in a richer way than BPMN maybe allow. Those things are things that we'll be adding in as well. Visualization capabilities, being able to switch around views or look at things in slightly different ways. All of these things become a lot more possible in the future now. And that's really the goal of this. The goal was to give us a platform for a design tool, design application that is architected for the future. So both for working in a cloud context and also working with newer and newer possibilities as we go forward. So this new design is well underway, and it's something that you can expect to see in the new year. Yes, that's something which we're very excited to be able to get into people's hands to play with. But it will evolve. It's one of those things which is a great starting point, but it's going to evolve into even more interesting areas. So that was just a bit of a view into some of the things that are coming more urgent immediately in the future as far as product. The other thing I want to talk about is something which is more of a blueprint for where we're going in the longer term, that sort of, not something that is going to be available immediately next year, and maybe something that takes 1 or 2 or 3 years to actually evolve over time. And there's many different aspects to it. So I'm not going to go into the detail on it, but just the idea here is this is a bit of a blueprint for way we will think about process and the way we want to approach process. There's a bunch of different terms that we're using for some of these things. So process chain is the idea. But before talking about what our plan is, one of the things it's quite useful when you're talking about long-term plans to actually take a step back and say, well, before we plan for a great, glorious future, what is it about us? What is it that we're good at? What is it that we think about? And what is the way we think about things? And so taking a step back, the thing to remember about Flowable is the team behind Flowable were the ones that established open source, sophisticated, efficient, scalable enterprise BPM. We were the guys, we invented it from that point of view. So that taking something and building it, making it enterprise worthy, making it super scalable, super efficient, and open source and open is something that is just built into our DNA. But what we've done with that, we've not just taken that, we've evolved it and expanded the capabilities within that. So we've added things like CMMN, we've added for case management, we've added chat, we've added a lot of low-code features. And evolution is a very important a key word here. So we haven't done huge jumps where we've made big changes that customers have to change, the way they work or anything like that. This is evolutionary. Our approach to innovation is evolutionary. And we've been constantly evolving. I think one of the things that we're recognized for is our innovation. And so where do we go in the future? Based on where we've come from, based on the way we approach evolution, what is it that we're going to do next? I mean, we've got BPMN, we've got CMMN, we've got DMN, we've got some low code. We can do more of those bits. We've got scalability. We can do more of those bits. But really, how do we take in automation and really push it outside the boundaries that we've been working to so far? And part of that is for us is thinking about what we mean by end-to-end automation. Often when we talk about end-to-end automation and other people in this space talk about end-to-end automation, that's end-to-end automation within an enterprise, within an organization, within a corporation. And it really has the assumption that the automation has full control over their world. And in reality, what is happening is the automation is happening inside an enterprise glass jar. You can see out and you can see stuff that's happening outside of the enterprise, but really you can only control what's inside your jar. And maybe occasionally, if you're allowed, someone will take the lid off the jar and you can maybe reach out and get information in or out. But really, your world is encompassed and controlled and limited by the enterprise. And in our view, end-to-end automation isn't two things. It isn't just contained within that enterprise glass jar, and it isn't monolithic. A lot of the products in automation, they basically are monolithic from the point of view as they see as they are the center of control. They are the controlling, orchestrating entity. And it doesn't matter if the technology underneath is made of really super distributed elements or anything else. The actual overall system, as the automation and orchestration goes, is monolithic. There's a centralized orchestrator. And in our view, end-to-end automation just can't be controlled that way. It doesn't exist or live that way. Full automation crosses both technical and organizational boundaries. So automation has to flow outside of that glass jar. And automation, the control of automation has to be passed to other people. You can't keep full control of it all the time. And also that means that automation needs to be able to run ideally everywhere. So not just in the cloud or on servers, or whether there's big servers, little servers, sort of microservers in Amazon, Azure, or whatever. It's got to be able to run in a variety of different places. And the best way of giving an example of that is an example. So if we think about a scenario where we've got an insurance claim, we'd like to be able to capture this and automate this. And we do this already with a number of our insurance customers. But now let's just look at what is the real end-to-end process that we're doing here. There's chaining of different elements of this that are going on. And at the moment, when we do the automation, we're only looking at a small portion of that. Car insurance claim. So first step is something happens. I've driven off the road. I'm in the countryside. I'm in the middle of nowhere, and my car's gone off the road. Ideally, I would like to be able to start my insurance claim now, but I'm in the countryside. I don't have a data connection. The internet just isn't accessible. I've probably got a phone signal, but not internet. But I still want to actually get going with my insurance claim. So really what you want to be able to do is, with a mobile device, start an offline claim sort of data collection. And I don't just mean, a smart form of some kind. I actually mean, follow through some steps, some guidance as what you need to do. What are the things you need to consider about the particular incident? What steps you might want to take, take some photos of information, take photos of the situation of your car, if anyone else is involved, take photos of those, actually guide people through the information that you need to collect as soon as possible and as fresh as possible. And again, without the assumption that you've got the ubiquitous internet that's constantly available to you, because sadly, we've learned that isn't the case. So you want to be able to do some offline data collection that's more than just collecting stuff in a form. When you're back onto a sort of data connection, and you actually then want that information to be shared sort of with another system, a collection point. And as an insurance company, you don't want to be exposing your internal systems to that. You want to be collecting that through a public cloud. You want to have a tenant somewhere in Amazon or Azure where people are talking to that, and that information is synchronized outside your firewall, and certain information is collected up and got the first stage to being able to be passed on into the enterprise. But before it's being passed on, maybe you want to do some augmentation of that information. They've taken some photos. Well, let's do some number plate recognitions. Let's see if we can pull out the number plate from the photos that are already there, and we can populate some data automatically by calling into sort of Amazon or Azure or Google AI services. Let's pull out the geolocation information from the images as well, just so we've got that information available to anything else that we can do. We can identify that there's a number of people that were in the photos. Let's sort of count up the number of passengers that were involved as well. So there's a lot of things that we might want to collect up while we're in this sort of a cloud environment. And again, before we pass it back into the enterprise. So now we've collected up and enriched a lot of the information about the claim. Now's the time to bring it into the enterprise, inside the firewall, and actually start the overall claims processing. And it may be that we want to do some auto approval, because this is a slam dunk. This type of claim is something we look at the data that's come in. Yep, absolutely no problem. We can automatically decide that. Maybe we're using some AI stuff that again is running in Amazon or Google or Azure or whatever, so that the in-house claim processing system can actually automatically approve something. Or it may go to the human approval, and a person has to get involved in approving that particular claim. At that point, you may be, we need to get an adjuster involved. Well, we don't actually have our adjusters in-house. We outsource the adjuster thing. So we actually need to go to another system which actually manages our outsourced services. And by the way, actually, our outsourced services, the list of adjusters is kept in an Excel spreadsheet. And so, you know, someone normally has to go and look up that spreadsheet. Maybe we've got RPA now that is actually going to look up the spreadsheet, and we can pull out who the outsourced service is that we want to talk there from a Windows desktop device. And then we want to communicate with the adjustment agency. Now, that agency may be working to a process that we've defined as what we would want them to do, but they're still an external agency. They're not using our systems. They're running independently. They're providing you know, their own services on top of what we need them to provide. And even within the adjuster, that third party, there are certain things where if they come across something which looks fraudulent, they are legally obliged in most jurisdictions to actually let the National Fraud Registry know about it, and then, you know, wait for information from that registry as to what they need to be able to do about that. So information can flow from the insurance company right out to a third-party adjuster agency, and again further out to someone else, before there's any chance of getting back to the consumer to say how this claim is going to be dealt with. So that's the type of an example. For me, that is an end-to-end business process. But as you can see, there's technical boundaries there, there's organizational boundaries there. There may be organizational boundaries even within the insurance company. It may be that the approval side is managed within one region, but the outsourcing is managed in a completely different country. And there are, for whatever data location, data residency reasons, that spreadsheet has to be in a particular country to be accessed. So even within organizations, you may have some of these boundaries that you have to cross. And across all of this, you want the tracking to be going on. You want to be able to be aware of, you know, that certain things happen at a particular stage, and, you know, were things done properly, were things done by a particular time, and everything like that. So just the tracking of the information across all these different things is important as well. So what does that look like if we look at it from a technical, what are the entities that we need in place to fulfill that? Well, obviously on the mobile device, you need a micro engine. You want a micro engine that can actually do a mini process for you, run a process fragment or a case fragment for you. In the cloud, you want to have a multi-tenant environment that is lightweight, so cost effective, but is also super secure. You don't want any type of process there that could possibly run out of control and take down your multiple tenants or take down your tenants. You want something which is secure from is outside the firewall. You want something that is absolutely locked down as possible. Once you start coming back in house, then that's where you're in our world now, where you're talking about Flowable Work, our internal end-to-end automation. But even there, you may want to be using a micro process engine within mobile devices, tablets, or something where you might be, even within your organization, going somewhere which is out of range of internet, or for whatever security reasons you're not allowed to have internet, but you still want to be able to do certain processes in a secure environment or within very regulated environments or whatever. So there's still, even within an enterprise, sort of reason for having these sort of separate mobile execution sort of engines. Again, working, on a desktop, it would be great. I mean, Microsoft Windows now comes with built-in RPA. If you've got Windows 11, you've got an RPA for free. It's just to actually manage and orchestrate that. You can either pay Microsoft, or you could use a desktop engine to actually coordinate those things. So without actually going for a full RPA solution, you could, with a desktop mini process engine, actually just use the stuff that's built into Windows, for example, and again communicate with a full fat, full capability BPMN solution like Flowable Work. And then the ideal would be, with the corporate that's doing your adjustment, ideally, they're using Flowable Work as well. You want to be able to communicate from one Flowable Work to another organization's Flowable Work and transfer the flow of an overall process out there. And again, with some corporates, that may be a process that you've defined that you want them to run. In other situations, it may be, like the fraud registry. That's going to be another organization. Ideally, if they're sensible, they'll be using Flowable Work as well, but they may not be. But again, that idea that you need to be able to communicate and initiate process and get returned information. The flow of the overall process is sometimes out of your control. So these are the elements that you need. Oh, and a cloud engine, a really lightweight cloud engine that can be serverless, so it can be doing this service task orchestration. I want to pipeline my AI and my image analysis and everything else. I want a cloud engine that's native to that type of environment, but again, very lightweight and very cost-effective way of working. So as a step towards this type of architecture, one of the key elements is something we're calling Flowable Jet. So this is a new engine. It's a small but very powerful process execution engine. And the idea is that it takes the best of BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. You could run something that you'd find to run in a Flowable Jet engine on the BPMN, CMMN, DMN engines, but really it is trying to take a focus set that is focused around the idea of being super secure, so that you can't run something and make something take over all the resources or do something crazy, or can be easily hacked in some way or whatever. Very streamlined, so it's lightweight, simple, so that you can sort of make it very accessible to people to define the process, but also sophisticated, so that you can get some of the more sophisticated capabilities that you naturally need for something like the solutions that we want to have. On top of that, you want to be able to run this engine natively on a number of different devices. So you want to be able to run this engine natively on mobile devices, iOS, Android. You want to run it on desktop. You want to be able to run it on Windows. You want to be able to run it in the cloud, but also you want to be able to run it for certain situations where non-interactive, you've got a series of service tasks where you're not doing anything, where you're interacting with a human or something like that. You could be stateless, and there you could be using serverless technology. And suddenly you can get hyperscale at a micro price, because this would actually be built to be able to give you stateless execution in those scenarios. So it's an engine that's built for this very specific sort of context, very specific environments. The really important thing about it is this is not a replacement for the existing engines. It's not something you think about, okay, I need to re-implement everything in Jet to be able to use it. The idea here is it's an extension. It allows you to reach out from Flowable Work and reach into the places and run processes where you can't currently reach. So you can think of it more like distributed process execution. So you can distribute the execution of this to other elements. It could be even IoT devices. But the type of examples that I gave there with sort of a mobile device or whatever, you can think of it more as like edge automation. I want to actually push my process execution out to the edge. One of the things I should have said there, one of the other things, because of the simplicity, we can also imagine giving more simplified modeling sort of ways of describing those things. So rather than having to go into a full BPMN, there may be a lightweight way of expressing a process or a case, a number of steps, which can make it more accessible, say, to a business user or business analyst. So now with Flowable Jet in mind, well, Flowable Jet is architected to fit in all those places where we want to actually get to the edge. So Flowable Jet can be multi-tenant but secure. You're not being able to get one tenant is going to take out another tenant. You can put it outside a firewall. It's going to be robust and also cost-effective, lightweight. You're not going to be spending loads on giving even more money to Amazon than you already are. But it can also sit in those environments in a stateless way and do all your serverless execution, talk to your AI services very naturally, very quickly, again, making it cost-effectively and highly scalable. Then within your corporation, you've got with Flowable Work, your full fat process automation, case automation going on, intelligent automation. But even there, being able to use Jet on a mobile device, being able to use Jet on a Windows device to automate the built-in RPA that Microsoft have gifted all of us, and interact with other Flowable Work instances. And then going outside to another work instance with third party, the idea that you can actually not just push out maybe process definitions, but pull in process definitions from other places. So some of the things that this also introduces is adjusting the ideas of how you deploy a process. One of the things, so obviously you would have the idea that I can create a process for a Flowable Jet and design a Flowable Jet model and just deploy it to the Jet engine. But part of what we're thinking is really actually what you want to be able to do is design a process and it really is designing the end-to-end, it probably is a case rather than a process, but design an end-to-end view of the overall automation that you want to achieve. And it may be that when you get to a certain element of that, there's a sub-process, which is the adjuster process. And you design it all, you've got this full picture and you can see the full end-to-end flow. But when you get to the adjuster process, that's something that is not actually going to be executed within your Flowable Work environment. It may be something that the adjuster, their system is configured to actually pull in the definitions from you, a trusted source, and execute your definition of what you want them to do as part of their process. It's fully in their environment, fully in their control, and as far fully in their responsibility of the sort of automation environment, but they've got your execution plan that you want them to follow. You've described it, and the way it's published out is in a more distributed way. And so, yeah, some of the smart stuff that we'll include in all this is not just, you know, a new engine and things like this, but the deployment models, how you actually deploy these in a more distributed way. And then again, making sure things are secure, that audits are fully in control and everything like that. So really, yeah, this is just a bigger picture, a longer term story of you know, how this evolution of innovation happens within Flowable. We're trying to take it beyond just the, you know, the world that we live in now. Thinking about executing process on different devices, different environments, pushing the boundaries of where you can get your automation and where that automation is actually being executed, opens up a whole range of new possibilities and capabilities. And the idea that you can actually chain automation securely across these organizational technical boundaries, again, it just opens up ways of thinking about doing things even within an organization. That just opens up opportunities for thinking about things and architecting things a very different way, give more autonomy and control to different parts of an overall end-to-end process. And it also allows you to think about automating process across the whole supply chain. You know, whether that supply chain involves your customers, citizens, employees, or businesses or whatever. It just gives a way of actually thinking about what am I doing in the context of everything that's important to my business. How much of that can I control? How much of that can I influence? And give me ways and tools to actually sort of enforce that influence. So that's really where I wanted to stop, was just give you a bit of an insight into where are we going over the next few years. There's going to be a whole pile of other innovations that are happening as we go along. It's not just going to be focused on this low code and everything else. It's still a very key part of what we're going to be doing. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you for listening to me. I hope you've borne through all of this, and we've got some time now for some questions.
Yes, we got indeed. Let me just pull the questions up. So the first question was whether we plan to add a test module. I think we can probably say that this we already have somehow.
Yes, yeah. So if you haven't looked at Flowable Inspect, what are you doing? Just get on there now. Flowable Inspect is a feature that is absolutely a killer feature. You can do dynamic debugging of your processes and cases, inspect what's going on, see it all happening live as you're stepping through your forms, see what's going on, inspect stuff, change stuff, you know, evaluate expressions, understand exactly what's going on. But as well as doing it directly while you're debugging something or whatever, you can actually use it as a way to record a test case. So if you follow through a process, fill in the forms, everything, if you set it into test mode, everything that you do as part of that process is collected up as a test run. And you can replay those test runs. You can have multiple test runs. So you could have, you know, follow through different customer journeys and record those as test runs, and then use those later on and just replay those. So you can collect them up, you know, make some changes to your process later on, replay your test cases and see exactly what's going on. So there's already a lot of test capabilities there. I think some of the things, like saying, there's a whole pile of sort of incremental innovations and enhancements that we can make. The fact we've got those test runs that can be recorded, there's all sorts of interesting things we can do in terms of how you can use those, actually create test suites, actually some of the things in terms of when you maybe deploy a process. So some of the things we're thinking about is when you deploy a process, having the ability as part of your application model is to have processes that say what to do when I'm deployed. And so that process, so before the whole system is available as part of the deployment to the runtime, it's going to run through certain steps. So it may auto-configure certain data objects, for example, or fill some values automatically when it's deployed. It could actually run some of these test runs for you automatically so that you know when it's deployed, you will get a message at the end of that pre-deployment, have the test runs run okay? If they haven't, you've got information instantly that your latest deployment may not be quite as wonderful. It worked all in your non-production environment, something else, push it to production and something unpleasant has happened. We've been there, it happens. So yeah, there's a range of quite interesting things that we think about doing with those test runs going forward, like I say, in some of these more creative ways.
Yes, that's right. This one is an interesting one. This flowable chat sounds like some of the old BPL solutions which vanished with the rise of BPMN. Can you highlight the differences? And if a standard is used, BPL stands for Business Process Execution Language, right? So
that's a step back in prehistory for people that have been in the BPMN for a while. So it's, the chat stuff is nothing like BPL and BPL. No, I mean, I think the world of automation has moved on from BPL. No, the chat, if that was the question, the chat is more a channel rather than using a UI.
Jet, sorry. Flowable Jet,
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. No. So Jet, sorry. Yeah. No. Jet is the future. No, it is another execution engine. So Jet is just another execution engine, but to make it small enough to fit onto a mobile phone or mobile device, we can't push the whole of BPMN, CMMN, DMMN capabilities there, and all the other capabilities that, let's say, Flowable Work has. Jet is a really streamlined execution engine. BPL was a language for describing, so BPL is a description language. We're not going to move to BPL. We're still going to be using standard BPMN, but maybe enriching it. So like I say, it could be a call activity or a sub-process routine that you might say, you might mark an area of your process as this is something which is actually going to be deployed to this type of environment or this type of device. So it's the distributed part is still part of your overall BPMN process, but we've augmented it to deal with this, alternative deployment strategy. So there may be elements of the way that BPL was deployed that we'll be reusing, but we'll be thinking this more in the BPMN, CMMN way and how you deploy models, and that's not just the business process models. When you deploy something, it could be the forms that are associated with that. It could be security models as well. So when we talk about the Jet engine, there will still be some security aspects that we may want to include into sort of when information is presented to a user or a service or something like that.
Good. So the next one is, not sure, I think you touched on that, how Flowable Future correlates with Flowable Orchestrate. I think what you highlighted was, mostly Flowable Work, specific Flowable Design.
Yeah, so one of again, just looking back at who we are and what we've done, the core process engines, BPMN, CMMN, DMN, we've made those open source. That's not going to change. We're going to carry on enriching and innovating around that. You can see the innovation for those engines just hasn't stopped since we started. And like I say, they've been evolutionary. Then we've not forced anyone to jump to a completely different way of working or a different way of thinking. It's been very evolutionary, and those engines are still open source. We're still going to be adding things in there as we meet new environments. It was interesting when everyone started doing event-based or event-driven solutions. We had to think again, well, what's the role of events, to the Flowable engines? They're working in a different context. It's not the sort of old way that BPMN was originally considered. There were events within BPMN, but being able to plug into something like Kafka, there's a lot of work and thought that's beyond just the BPMN modeling side of that. We added that in when these sorts of environments, the way in which BPMN was being used, we added that into those core engines. So none of that is going to change, but Flowable Jet is going to be a subset of those capabilities, particularly to be able to run in these very demanding in terms of restricted environments.
That's right. Then we have a similar one. It's also talking about open source, but more about the UI, right? So you're talking about the Flowable Designer, and someone from the audience would like to know, will the modeler and other parts of the open source version UI get updated as well?
It's something that we're trying to work out the best way forward, to be frank on it. The focus for us is the engines. It always has been. Like I say, when we look at what motivates us and what is important to the largest Flowable community, it is the engines and those being open source. So that still is our focus. We've had to put a lot of work into the new design tool. We already have an enterprise only design tool, which has got a lot more capabilities for productivity and things like that. At the end of the day, we're a business. We've got to make money. We've got to pay the smart developers that build this stuff. So design, the new design will still be for the enterprise customers. We will make a version of it available for specifically for open source, and we'll be making a cloud version available first of all for that. But yeah, it's something about how we move forward with that. That's something we're still working on. The open source community will have access to the design, a design environment that will allow them to build models that will execute on the open source engines. That's that's absolutely guaranteed. It's just how do we make that available? What is that? Is the thing that we're trying to work out. What's best for us as a business, as well as best for the community.
Yep. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more. There's a question whether we would offer a beta channel through which enthusiasts can get early access to these innovations, right?
So we do. So yeah. So if I mean, some of the work we do with customers is giving them access and view of things that are coming, and it really depends on the customer and how they work with us as to how we do that. Again, we can't underestimate the effort involved in things like beta programs and things like this. It demands a lot of us. We tend to we do work very closely with the existing customers to make sure the things we're doing are what they want. We do make, in some cases, early access to certain things, just again to be sure that things work within a particular, and it may depend on the feature. We look for a customer that's working with extreme scale. If we've been building in some things that are to deal with challenges of extreme scale, I don't think we're quite ready yet for generic beta programs, but maybe a year's time, then I think we might be in a better place to consider that type of possibility.
Good, great. And then we have a couple suggestions. I think we can look over them after the session, but cool. Great new features. And yeah, maybe a last one. How would we handle deployments of apps with Flowable Jet? I think you touched on that. So
I touched on it. So I think one of the things that the focus has always been push deployment. So you design and you model, and you've got a repository of your models, whether that's a database repository or you take it into a source code control system, and then you push that out with to the runtime, and that could be at the same time as you're spinning up the runtime, or it could be that you're actually pushing out deployments in a live way. You publish out a deployment. One of the changes that we need to make for this is to actually make pull-based, and this also is true for thinking about cloud environments as well. Looking at pull-based, so that a runtime can be aware of trusted repositories of automation models, and that the runtime can decide, okay, I need to, for whatever reason, pull in a more updated process, or I'm alerted, I'm actually going to pull in. So you can manage the security and the updates and control the updates. Again, like I said, the whole idea of having ways of managing a deployment from the runtime side of things. So when you deploy a model, there's actually almost like pre-deployment processes and things that you can go through. Having a pull-based deployment model will allow these additional things to come into play, so that, so that there's then, you can decide what is the best deployment strategy for my overall solution that I want. Some cases it's going to be pull-based, sometimes it's going to be push-based.
Yes, and I think that's pretty much it. There are no new questions pouring in. Thanks everybody for sending in.
Thank you very much for listening. Yeah, and yeah, if you haven't played with Flowable already, go and download it now. There's a trial version, and
It's never too
can
late.
experience some of these things. No, absolutely. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.